Oh, that was wonderful, choir. Thank you so much. Lovely, lovely. You know, I neglected something on the announcements this morning. We have a new organist. Trish, can you stand up for a second so we can see you? Come on back. Yeah, let's welcome her. She didn't know I was going to do that to her. Sorry, Trish. Trish Meshke is a new member of our congregation, and we just, when she first came back earlier this summer, she just happened to mention that she played the organ. I said, really? We need to have coffee. And we did, and here we are. And so Trish is going to be working with a team of other organists, Julie and John. John was back there. He's someplace else now. And a couple of others. And so they'll be providing music for our worship services. And let's give them a hand, show our appreciation for all they do too. Thank you. So I know I asked this last week. Let me ask again this week. How many of you were here this last Wednesday night? Raise your hand. What a ride that was. That was just crazy. We were having confirmation back here, a parent meeting. And I got done a little bit before everybody else did. And so I came out, and the halls were just jammed with people. I had 3/4 of them. I had no idea who they were. It was just absolutely crazy. Back and forth, kids running all over the place. I came into the sanctuary. There were 138 people in the sanctuary when I came in here to worship on a Wednesday night. And, you know, and I have to tell you, worship, by the way, let me just stop here. This week, we have Pastor Dave's Flying Pancakes. I have 2 couples that are helping me make the pancakes. If any of you would like to help me make pancakes, commercial, see me afterwards. I could use the help. Okay, back to this. It was just crazy. The worship service itself, on one level, was like a holy mess. Nothing worked. The sound system was just kind of so-so in and out. We were clipping like crazy because the guitar was too loud, and you couldn't hear the singers very well. And the computer decided to take a nap on us, which meant that we had no words. And so, sort of underneath the surface, it was just a mess. But in the room, it was a bona fide Jesus party. The place was just rocking over the love of the Savior. And it was so cool. And I thought about that. I got to thinking this week, I wonder if my 2 great uncles were here who were pastors, Carl Grindberg and K.O. Journes, Knut Olsen Journes, if he were here, and by the way, Uncle Journes, what a character. I will tell you about him sometime. But if they were there that night, I'm going to guess that there was precious little that they would recognize as being Lutheran. I also know with all my heart that what was happening there on Wednesday night was Lutheranism at its finest. Lutheranism at its finest. What does that mean? Because I'm going to guess there's a lot of misconceptions out there. I know there were when I was growing up, and I think there still are now. So, if you think that Lutheran is an organization of 5,500 congregations with an office building in Chicago, you would be wrong about that. Okay? If you think that being Lutheran is a bunch of pastors and bishops and about 1,000 people that get together every once in a while in a hotel ballroom to make decisions about directions and who we are as a Lutheran people, you would be wrong about that. If you think that Lutheranism is a particular kind of worship and it has to be that, you would be, say it with me, wrong about that. Okay? If you think, like we talked about on Wednesday night, that Lutheranism is a bunch of 9th graders in white robes and red carnations standing up here at the end of October being questioned by the pastor to see if they are fit to be confirmed, you would be. And if you think that being Lutheran is moving to the fellowship hall after church, grabbing a cup of coffee, which we also call the Blessed Sacrament, and one of Bob and Shaunez's fabulous donuts, you would be, and that is a tough admission, let me tell you. So what is it to be Lutheran? And I got to thinking about that, and I think, fall is a good time to sort of just, everybody's coming back to school. Although, I have to tell you, this summer, you guys didn't really even leave. The place is always, we always have all these people here, and I think it's great. But fall is a good time to just sort of get back to basics. And so for the next several weeks until the end of October, we're going to be talking about what it is to be a Lutheran. And to sort of get at the heart and core of that. And what I want to do before we start singing is just leave you with this. If none of those things are being Lutheran, then what is? Let's sing. So this thing called Lutheranism started about 500 years ago with a man by the name of Martin Luther. And by the way, Luther is turning in his grave every time we say that word Lutheran Church, because he would be the first to tell you that it's not about him, that it's about Jesus Christ. And so it started for him in a thunderstorm. Have any of you heard this story before? It started for him in a thunderstorm. He was walking from town to town, and he got caught in this thunderstorm. And the lightning started striking, and a lightning bolt struck a tree right next to him. And it was the kind of lightning that just, like the one we had in our backyard here a couple of weeks ago, it hit the tree, and it just shattered the bark. It just flew every place. And Luther fell to the ground, trembling in fear, and he began to pray. He prayed to Saint Anne, and he said, Saint Anne, talk to Jesus, and if you will save me from this storm, I will become a pastor. And that's what he did. It's a bolt of lightning. And this wasn't on the radar for him, being a pastor. He was in law school. He was studying to be a lawyer. And he was good at it. He was top of the class. He was the smartest he was the best of the best and the smartest person there. And all of a sudden, he just, with that bolt of lightning, changes directions, goes in another way. His family didn't like it. His father wanted him to become a lawyer so they'd make a lot of money and take care of the old man in his old age. And so they had a falling out. But that's the way he went. Something else about Luther. He was also tormented. He was tormented by the thought that he was not good enough. That whatever he could do to please God, it would never be enough. He saw God as a terrible judge who expected full payment for every sin that Luther had ever committed. And so he becomes a priest. And he starts reading the Bible. And he starts studying the Bible. And then lightning strikes a second time. This time it's not a single bolt that hits a tree, but it's the kind of lightning that strikes page by page and verse by verse. As slowly he begins to realize that everything he knew and believed about his God was wrong. God's not an angry judge. God's a loving Father. He reads this in the Bible, and then he comes to this verse, the verse I just read to you from Romans. It says, all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. Everybody. You can't reach it, no matter how much you climb. Luther thought he had to climb to God. No matter how much you climb, you'll never get there. All have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And so God justifies you himself. You see, what matters is not what you do. What matters is what God does for you. He loves you so much that he gives his only Son. Let me say that again. He loves you so much so that he comes to you where you are, in your sin, in that whatever climb you're trying to make yourself a better person so that you can get to heaven. He comes to you in that and says, stop. This is a gift. It's called grace. And you can't earn it, and you can't buy it, and you can't climb to it. I have come to you. I'm beside you, and I have made you my own by the gift through faith. Those are the things that matter. And that's the core of Lutheranism. Now, let's go back to this whole God terrible judge thing and climbing up the ladder. Luther didn't learn that in a vacuum. That's what the church was teaching at the time. They were teaching that, so Luther while Luther is discovering this whole new understanding of what really matters, the church was teaching a different version of what matters. That you have to climb your way up to heaven, that you have to earn your way to heaven. And so they had this thing called purgatory. Some of you have probably heard of that. And I like to call it God's penalty box. It's not hell, it's not heaven, it's someplace in between where there is pain and anguish, and if you're not good enough, you have to stay there for thousands upon thousands of years until finally you have paid off all your debt of sin and you can go into heaven, maybe. And this is what people believe. This is what Luther believed. Everyone believed it. You're saying, why didn't they read the Bible? Because they couldn't. It wasn't in front of them. The Bible was in Greek and in Hebrew. These people spoke German. The church services were in Latin. They really, unless they could memorize the words, but they didn't necessarily know what the words meant. They just had to depend upon someone else to tell them what it was all about. And the church's version was that God was an awful judge. And that the church's version was you had to work your way to heaven. And the church's version was your dead uncle is now in purgatory and will spend 5,000 years there. And by the way, we have something for you. The Pope has offered up a gift. For the mere price of $15,000, he will sign a piece of paper that will release your dead uncle's soul from thousands of years of purgatory, and he will know this relief. They had people out selling these things. A guy by the name of John Tetzel is going from place to place to place, and he's got puppets. He's got actors who are anguishing in hell, and he has this little jingle. He says, "When the coin in the coffer rings, a soul from purgatory springs." And Luther says, well, that's great, but it's nowhere in the Bible. These are not the things that matter. And in fact, Luther started calling the church for what it was. That's theological malpractice. That's corruption. They were playing on the emotions of people who were devout and earnest and just wanted to do the right thing and be in good graces with God. And they were making money on it right and left. And they were building their buildings down in Rome. All on something that was completely false. That's what Lutheranism is. It focuses on the things that matters. It brings us back all the time to the things that matter. It was called the Reformation. Luther didn't want to start his own church. He wanted to reform the church that he was in. Didn't work out that way. But that's what it is to be a Lutheran. It's to always go back to those things that matter. The things that matter, you can't earn it. You'll never be good enough to get into God's kingdom. And so God comes to you. So that whatever you are struggling with, whatever sin that is assailing you, whatever problems you have, Jesus is right beside you. And he says, come, let me take it. And you might say to him, what do I have to give you? And Jesus said, nothing. I am here because I love you. Let's sing. Lutheranism at its finest. Okay. It's not an organization of 5,500 congregations with an office building in Chicago. It's not pastors and bishops and church meetings. It's not this, it's not that. And I have to tell you, there's nothing wrong with any of those things. As long as they don't pretend to be something they're not. As long as they don't take the place of the things that really matter. Case in point. I love Lutheran liturgy. I love what we do here on Sunday morning. Why? Because I don't remember a time that I wasn't immersed in it. To me, Lutheran liturgy feels like the receiving blanket that my mother wrapped me in when I was first born. And it's in the deepest part of my soul. And it will wrap me and comfort me until the day I die. So I love Lutheran liturgy. I love what happens here on Wednesday night. I love the way it touches people who have always believed that what we have to say here doesn't apply to them. I love that. I love being part of that movement, of being part of something larger than myself, and seeing the lights come on for someone who's always been on the outside. Those are the things that matter. The things that matter. Speaking grace. The love of God, the free gift of salvation to people who are lost and alone. And I'm not talking about just the people here on Wednesday night. I'm talking about everyone who's sitting in this room, because we are all, each in our own way, lost and alone. What matters? What matters is how the church sees itself. That it's not a group of perfect people. I prefer to think of us as a box full of broken and misfit toys. Every one of us. And an owner of that box who, because we're broken and misfit, loves us all the more. That's what matters. It's not climbing a ladder. It's not being a good person. It doesn't mean you shouldn't be a good person. You need to be a good person. But that being good isn't going to save you. What saves you is Jesus Christ. That's what comes first. The good works come after that. What matters is that we touch hearts. Is that we speak and say things that love people. Not just to be saying and speaking those things, but because we really do love people. We love people with the love of Jesus, the love that first drew us in. And we share that love with others. These are the things that matter. This is who we are. And so for the next several weeks, we're going to talk about that. We're going to break it apart. It's going to be just a little bit of history, but and quite a bit of actually confirmation class. Almost like a confirmation refresher. Basics of Lutheranism. Who we are. But at the heart of it all is this man who was tormented, who believed that what he did mattered. And in that torment and in that struggle, he found it's not about him. It's about a God who loved him. And my friends, it's not about you. It's about a God who loves you. And for that we give him thanks and praise. Amen.